This is LibreQuest and I am Lux of Linux Lounge, and I'm talking with you about a type of program that you might not think about all that often: on-screen keyboards. Now, there are lots of options to fit different users of different needs on the Linux desktop. Some cater more towards users of touchscreen devices, such as people who use tablet PCs, whereas others are more aimed at mobility impaired users. And we're going to have a look at a few different on-screen keyboards for a few different types of users. First up, we're going to be looking at an on-screen keyboard called Onboard. Now, as I said, the first program we have to talk about is Onboard. And for viewers of the video version of this podcast, you can see that now we are on the desktop. So let's just go ahead and launch Onboard. And there we go, we have the keyboard. It's kind of difficult to explain, but it's sort of carved out its own space at the bottom of the screen, which is really nifty. It's moved the Ubuntu dock up slightly, and you can actually change how large the keyboard is, which is nice. I want it to fill quite a lot of the space that it's kind of allocated for itself. And if we go ahead and just open up a text editor, we can see that it does not overlap with the GNOME menu, which fantastic. We can go ahead and enter in our text, which it will do, which brilliant again. Now, just to talk about the keyboard in a basic sense, I think Onboard would be quite useful for a user who kind of just wants something to operate their touchscreen PC with. It's on the screen all the time, but it's not intrusive, which is always nice. Now, of course, we can go into the Onboard settings menu as well, which it does have a settings menu, and we have quite a lot of settings. We've got more general stuff. We can actually get it to automatically show and hide, which is nice. There we go. It will pop up when we need to enter text, which is fantastic, much like any other touchscreen keyboard. And as we can see, it just goes away, gives us back the space that it's allocated for itself. Always nice. We can, change various options about the keyboard itself. Does it have a background? Is it transparent? That sort of thing. Always nice. We can change our layouts. We can change our themes, and there's quite a lot of themes. Go on, just for curiosity's sake, let's see what the ambience theme looks like. And as we can see, it's ambience white, which is always nice. You've got a typist keyboard, which will kind of show you which fingers you should be using which keyboard row with, which is a little bit unnecessary with an on-screen keyboard, but that's fair. You can have snippets. You can get it to actually play a sound when you use it, which is always nice. And of course, as I say, you can get it to auto show, auto hide. You can get word suggestions, which that's really cool. And as you can see, they work perfectly. You can get it to auto correct. Well, you can get it to auto capitalize things. And you've got a few universal access settings. So of course, accessibility stuff, which is nice. So all in all, this is a fantastic keyboard, which is absolutely on par with, if not better than, what you'll probably be familiar with using on, Windows or Android or whatever else. So if you've got a touchscreen device, I would highly recommend Onboard. But with that said, let's go look at the next keyboard. Well, for our next keyboard, we have a Matchbox keyboard. And what this essentially is, it's a very simple keyboard, which is very easy to write XML layouts for and what have you. And I see a lot of people using this on Raspberry Pis and stuff, and I would imagine that's kind of in part what it's designed for. Which of course on my 1080p display, which I think that's a lot bigger than what this keyboard was expecting, because it's incredibly small in the corner of my display. I also think the GNOME desktop environment doesn't really play as nice as it could with it, but let's do the best with what we've got. As you can see, it's an incredibly simple keyboard with a quite simple layout. You can type whatever you would be able to with a standard keyboard though, which is always nice. And as you can see, it does work. It does not always stay on the top of Windows, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, but fair enough. And yeah, all in all, Matchbox keyboard, fairly simple keyboard, does its job. I'm not sure if I prefer it to the keyboard we're going to look at next for an incredibly simple keyboard, but yeah, this could work. And if you're doing some kind of Raspberry Pi project, yeah, it works. Righto, well, before we look at the next on-screen keyboard, it does need a little bit of an explanation. And this next on-screen keyboard is called Dasha, and it was developed by the Inference Group at Cambridge University, and originally it was intended to create a method of entering text into, PDAs and other such mobile devices. And I can't really see it having taken off like that, but you never know. But I suppose the result of this was more a vital alternative to standard on-screen keyboards that are used by thousands of people with physical disabilities, even now. And most on-screen keyboards kind of have like a very similar layout to a regular keyboard that only really displays what looks like a regular keyboard. Dasha is radically different, and as a consequence of that can actually provide typing rates of up to 39 words per minute, although I think most people are probably going to get about 20 to 30, which, to be fair, that's a pretty high words per minute count, and I've seen, people who are fully able-bodied who type slower than that, so that's very impressive. Rather than using kind of like static keys that mimic a normal keyboard, Dasha employs a sort of letter stream where the alphabet kind of flows towards you and you catch the letters as they pass. Actually, you're sort of really zooming into each letter and revealing more letters underneath that which will go to form the next character in the word that you're typing. So it's a very interesting concept, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. Now, for the benefit of the audio-only podcast listeners, I'm going to have to try and explain what I'm looking at here. Now, what this is Dasha, and what you kind of get is this program which kind of doesn't look like anything when you first look at it. However, the gist of it is you have all these letters laid out to the right, and you have your sort of little cursor, I guess you could call it, on the left. And what you can essentially do is zoom into the letter that you want. So for example, let's say we want to type in Linux Lounge. So we go ahead and zoom into the L, which all we need to do is click and move the mouse where we want. So there's our L, and you can see that there's a little text box at the top of the screen. And we've got an L that's been inputted, and as you can see, as we move along, letters continue to flow at us, which it looks very bizarre, but if you got good at this, it would be pretty great, I suppose. And of course we've got our LI, so we head over here to our N, and it does take a second. However, eventually we head over to the U, and you can see it's typing it in as we zoom in, and where's the X? Yeah, that's when things start to get a little bit difficult when you want to type in, more uncommon letters. Yeah, I can't seem to find it, but that's fine. We're just going to leave it there, I suppose. But as I say, you could totally... Oh, here we go. We have found the X. It's just at the bottom here. And it's more or less alphabetical, but of course your vowels and stuff are where you can get them. As you can see, we've typed in Linux with Dasha. This is definitely not going to be replacing your on-screen keyboard for day-to-day use. However, if you have some sort of mobility impairment, if you get good at it, I can easily see someone typing at 40 words per minute on this. It's quite logical in the way that it works as well. And, you can increase the speed on it if you want to try and type faster, which, cool. So pretty much every function you could want out of a keyboard, well, it's here. and it works pretty well. You can use it for pretty much any language you want as well. It's not just locked to English, so that's nice as well. Some preferences you can configure. So all in all, Dash is a fantastic program, and I'm sure it's doing like a lot of good. And that's just kind of that shows the power of open source software, I suppose. But with that said, I think this is probably going to be one of the more interesting keyboards we look at today, but let's move on to the next one. And for the last keyboard we're going to be looking at today in this episode of LibreQuest, I'm going to say this is probably my favourite minimalist keyboard. Onboard was my favourite keyboard overall, but this is for if you want something that doesn't, clog up too much space and is very simple, and that is xvkbd, and that's KVB Virtual Keyboard. And as you can see, it's very simple, no nonsense, just works. So, and for the benefit of the podcast listeners, I will just describe it briefly. It's a great keyboard with no theming or anything like that, but everything you could want out of a keyboard is here. You've got all your function keys, your backspace, all your letters are where you would expect them, a number pad, your up, down, your arrow keys, all the good stuff like that. And you have, of course, a little settings menu, an about page, all that sort of thing. Now first, let me demonstrate that yes, it does in fact actually not seem to play nice with this desktop out of the box. If I switch window, then switch back, doesn't seem to work. If we go into the settings menu, you've got some some settings regarding the keyboard. You can show hide the keypad, show hide the function keys, you can connect to a remote display. Nice. You've got a manual for how to use it. Cool. And in the properties, you can keep the keyboard on top, which is a fantastic function to have, because the last keyboard actually doesn't stay on top. And if we go ahead and do that, as you can see, yeah, that's on top. Still doesn't type properly though. I'm really not sure what that's about. However, if you can get it to work, this is quite a nice simple keyboard. Yeah, you can automatically click. You can have a click sound effect. Has a dictionary apparently. So yeah, if you can get it to work, that would be a very nice minimalist keyboard. It even resizes, so you can have like a huge on-screen keyboard if you so desire. But yeah, that's all I've got to say about xvkbd, and I think that ends this episode of LibreQuest. And that has been a quick look at several on-screen Linux keyboards. We've looked at some simple on-screen keyboards that just work to some fascinating open source innovations, and I hope you've enjoyed all of it. You can find LibreQuest on several other platforms. Just head over to LibreQuest.org and we have a full list of where you can find our show. We got RSS, we got PodBean, we got YouTube, and we got so much more. If you really liked the show, you can support it on Patreon or Subscribestar. And once again, I am Lux of Linux Lounge, and you can find my content on YouTube, LBRY, and several other video sharing sites under the name Linux Lounge. And until next time, this has been LibreQuest. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can send us a tip on LBRY at lbry.tv/@LibreQuest. You can also join us on Patreon and Subscribestar. If you would like to send us feedback, you can send your email to feedback@librequest.org. You can also join the forum at librequest.org/forum. As always, thank you for being a listener, and we'll talk to you next time on LibreQuest.